Hey guys, welcome to Can We Talk? And today I have my buddy, my friend, and one of the people who really helped me get exposure in the low carb community, and that's Vinnie Tortorich. And I just want to make sure you know a little bit about what he's done. I'll make this really quick. Vinnie in 2013 wrote his book, Fitness Confidential. And I really recommend that book because I think it really provides a nice foundation around, exercise. But more importantly, particularly if you get the audio version, I think you'll appreciate it because it's a story told by the author in his voice, and it adds additional content that you probably won't get in the book. Then in 2019, he made his first documentary, a fatter documentary. And then in 21, he made a second one, Fat 2, a documentary. And now in 2022, he's going to release his new documentary, Beyond Impossible. And this one is going to focus on fake burgers. I hate to call it fake burgers, but it is what it is, made from plant sources. And I guess if it's not from a beef or a cow, it's probably okay to call it fake. So I really want to welcome Vinnie to this broadcast because I think we're going to really have a nice discussion. And I really appreciate him, not only for being here today, but allowing me to have a voice and to share my perspective on this topic. So Vinnie, welcome to Can We Talk?
Tony, it's a pleasure to be on. And I love the fact that you have a show called Can We Talk? I'm sure Melissa Rivers will be calling you at any time to go, hey, that's my mom's line. And what are you guys doing? But I was a big Joan Rivers fan. And I love that you're co-opting that Can We Talk moniker because, I think what's going on in the world today, so much kabuki theater, around health and fitness. And, we've seen that with the pandemic and everything else. And, it becomes one of these "what are we doing" things. And
right.
let me give a quick example. When you look at the pandemic, at first they said, hey, we have this pandemic. You need to wash everything before it comes in your house. It can live on a package for a month, and oh my God, leave it out in the sunshine. That may help, but man, this is a super virus. And then you don't even try to wear a mask because if you don't have an N95 mask, it
Right.
won't even work, and on and on and on. And then it comes to something else and something else and something else. It's like, now you need to wear a mask even if it's not N95 because we told you it didn't work, but now we're telling you it works. The same thing goes on, and I could go on and on with that, right?
Yes.
Last night I went to a theater to watch my wife in a choir, and they said at the door, you need to have a Vax card, and you need to have a mask on when you get to the door. Mask on, Vax card in your hand with your ID. Okay, I had all of that, and then at intermission, I wandered around and I came in and sat back down. At intermission, everyone got a beer or a wine or popcorn or soft drink or whatever, and they're all sitting in the theater eating and drinking while this is going on. And I'm going, okay, if it was all that important, if it was all so damn important, why can we now pull the mask right off and start eating? Nothing is more mind-boggling to the public than when you tell them lies, right? And that's exactly what we do with health and fitness every single day. And until the pandemic, I didn't have anything to point to go, look what they're doing over there. They're doing that over here too.
Right.
But no one really cared. And by the way, I would be willing to bet more people are dying of morbid obesity, of chronic diseases related to morbid obesity than anything else.
No doubt. In fact, there's not a maybe to that. You got 17 million people every year dying from or getting a heart attack every single year in the world. So the real pandemic is metabolic health, which leads to cardiovascular disease, that includes stroke, which leads to cancer, which leads to dementia, and all diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no doubt that that's the true pandemic, and people are confused. That's why I agree with you. Can we talk? allows for us to have a conversation on either side of the aisle in a respectful manner. I think we'll talk a little bit about how you tried to talk to others on the vegetarian side of the aisle during your attempt to make this great documentary. I also want to, it's so funny you have a Saints hat on. Obviously, we have roots in New Orleans. I went to school there.
Yeah.
You've lived there, Tulane, Xavier. But I'm going to tell you something. I too was with my wife last night watching her perform. She wasn't singing as much as she was in her first local play. I think it was called Mika Scrooge. And it was like a urban version of the Scrooge. So I was celebrating my wife's her accomplishment and supporting her. But I'm going to tell you something, man. Can We Talk is about us being able to have that conversation. Another thing that you won't believe, and I promise it's true. She is the one that came up with the title. My wife, my lovely wife. So she just said, it should be that, it's not your podcast. It's not your protecting your nest. You're just hanging out with your buddies and friends and family. So I'm going to incorporate her. She's a pharmacist. She's type 1 diabetic. She has a lot to offer. I have kids who are doing low carb, and they're in, at WashU, they're doing their thing. So it's really an opportunity to have a conversation, not only with guys like you who are out here making a difference, and not just the Tim Noakes of the world. It's going to be people like friends and family. So I really appreciate your comments, and let's talk a little bit about Beyond Impossible. But let's do this first. Let me share some of my thoughts about fat and cholesterol, because I think people need to understand that in order to understand, why we're even talking about this topic. So I have some good news for so many people out there who fear fat and cholesterol. And I was the same way. I was a vegetarian for probably 8 years. And when I was going to write my book, Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes, it was really going to be a vegetarian diet that would allow me to express that methodology. And let's be clear, a standard American diet is going to be harmful. And that's pretty clear. So whether you're doing vegetarian or low carb, carnivore, those diets will always be better than the standard American diet. But so I did my research, and back then I looked at the research and realized, oh my God, they've had studies since 2003 that suggest that the low carb diet is better for metabolic health. And it shocked me because I had spent 8 years and so I did my own experiment at that time and decided, let me go ahead and try this, and my life changed. And again, I was doing pretty good with the low fat, the vegetarian diet, but I feel so much better with low carb. And I say it that way because I want those vegetarians out there who are doing vegetarian. That's okay if that works for you. For those who are still confused about this question, I want to just point them to something that Healthline put out there. The Public Health Collaborative did as well, but it's called 23 studies on the low carb and low fat diets. And I think that's a great place to start, because you'll see that literally in 2003 and beyond, there are studies that give you all the randomized controlled trials, the high level of evidence trials that will help them feel less concerned. Another thing that they can search is the American Journal of Cardiology. And what they said is that saturated fat does not cause heart disease. Another thing they can search is the American Diabetes Association, which now has a very low carb recommendation as one of their dietary patterns, and a low carb. And I really think that's important, particularly since the CEO of the ADA was able to get off of insulin and most of her meds. I think she was just left with metformin. So she was able to get off, and she didn't do it with an Impossible Burger. She did it with carb restriction. And lastly, and I made a video about this also. So if those who want to check that out on YouTube, we also had the American, I think it was the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, and they also have low carb as an option. So if the reason for anybody watching this is of being plant-based is based on the fear of fat and cholesterol from animal products, you really can safely and easily return to eating animals if you choose to. Certainly you don't have to. So let me tell you one example, Vinnie, before I hear your comments about how I talk about cholesterol in my clinic. And so I remember when I was a vegetarian, Dr. I think his name was Michael Clapper with a K, right? And he had this great video. It was arterial plaque prior to coronary artery bypass surgery, a must watch. So search that on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's a very brief video. And he talked about how a patient had eaten a cheeseburger and a milkshake, and all of a sudden you see he shows a tube, right? And the tube is like all this cloudiness. It looks like milk, right? And he's like, "Oh my God,
Right.
that's clogging your arteries, right?" And so I shared that video with patient after patient after patient, trying to convince them to become vegetarian or vegan. So what I tell patients now, after having done the research and understanding how the body works, that it's not what you think. I say, well, imagine your house is inflamed, and your house is the same as your arteries, right? And your cholesterol, there's no such thing as bad cholesterol. For the most part, there's small and large particles, but your LDL cholesterol is the mortar. And the mortar is to repair your arteries and your cells from damage, from inflammation that came from the starchy, sugary, the grains and the sugars. And so, but if you have too much mortar, you may need to remove it from the body. So you have your HDL or your good cholesterol that brings it away from the house. Now, if you live in a brick house, and I do, and you don't want to have a stucco house, you just try not to have too much inflammation. So if I reduce my inflammation, starch, sugar, grains, then my cholesterol won't stucco my house, which is the equivalent of saying clogging your arteries. And so what I try to explain to people is that if you reduce the inflammatory things, then the cholesterol is actually not the issue. The cholesterol is trying to do its job. It's trying to help repair your house. And the reason why it's over repairing your house is because of the starch and sugar. So I just wanted to start our conversation, Vinnie, by helping people understand. I have a whole chapter in my Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes book that was written in 2017. The science started in 2003. Why did they take all these other organizations? Literally, the Diabetes Association did not feel comfortable with low carb until the end of 2019. So what took them so long? And I just want to hear your thoughts on the fat cholesterol issue.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say before I answer that, to answer something you were talking about earlier, I'm not upset with vegans. As a matter of fact, if someone lives a perfect vegan lifestyle, they're about 85% there, and they will be a lot healthier than someone who's eating junk food and seed oils and everything else. So
That's correct.
because they're eating whole foods, they're just missing some of the vital proteins that you need. Everyone knows the term amino acid,
Mm-hmm.
and the only fully charged amino acid proteins with all the amino acids comes from animals. So no matter what, you're going to miss that. You'll get close. You can get close with pea protein. You can kind of get there with soy protein. The problem with both of those is what you just said. They cause inflammation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to be a vegan, you will be 85% down the road. If you're a vegetarian who eats eggs, you will be 95% down the road.
Yeah.
Some of these vegetarians will also eat, real cheese and that kind of thing. You're 95% down the road. You can actually live on that diet pretty healthily for the rest of your life. If you want to be 100%, you have to eat red meat. Sorry, that's just the fact. That this is not me. People say, "Oh, he's a shill for the meat industry."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wish I was a shill for the meat industry, because as of right now, today, they have not put one penny in my wallet. Not one penny. So I'm not a shill for anyone. I'm just a guy saying, hey, look, I don't have a horse in a race. I'm just telling you what the science is, not what not some fairy tale of what I want the science to be. So now to answer the last part of your question, what's in it for the ADA, the AHA, to let your audience know, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, what's in it for them? Well, they got the information way back when, 20 years ago. So Tony goes, wait a minute, I'm a medical doctor. Why wasn't I informed of this 20 years ago?
Exactly.
My wife is a pharmaceutical. She makes medicines. Why doesn't she know?
Right.
Well, If you look at who funds the AHA and the ADA, it's little tiny companies with names like Coca-Cola, okay, Mars. Mars makes candy bars.
That's right.
Unilever. These people give not hundreds of thousands, millions upon millions per year. And here's my favorite part. Coca-Cola and said companies actually have their science do the research on sugar and then just hand the research over to the AHA and go, hey, look, we did the research for you. No need to go do that. Not only are we giving you millions, it won't cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the scientists to go do actual research. That's like when we looked at what the cigarette companies were doing, they were going, hey, tobacco's not bad. What are you talking about? Tobacco?
Right.
Back in the 70s, Tony, back when you and I were still kids, doctors used to tell women, hey, you want to lose some weight? Smoke. There were, and if people think I'm kidding about this, the ads used to say, most doctors, kind of like the chewing gum, hey, most dentists recommend Trident, right? We all know that ad, right? There were ads, there were print ads, and if you think I'm kidding, folks, you can Google it, as the kids say today, that will say most doctors recommend Cool, because Cool has a mental soothing thing for your throat. I'm not making this up. Smoke Tarantin. Tarantin is easier. Most doctors recommend Tarantin. They had doctor recommendations on cigarettes. Okay? That's where we were in the 1970s. By the way, insanity. Back then, when everyone was smoking, less people were dying of heart disease. Not saying smoking's good for you. It's still bad for you. But with all the smoking, there was smoking in commercials. There was smoking on television. There was smoking in movies. You didn't see an actor, even if an actor didn't smoke, they had to, your wife's an actress now, they would have to fake smoke. They would have to learn how to fake smoke because it was cool to be a cool actor or actress in a movie and smoke. Heart disease was down back then compared to where we are today. So you would say, okay, less smoking. You can't even put it on television without putting a warning at the top of the show. Warning. There will be someone holding a cigarette in it. You can't even do that, right? But now we have heart disease off the charts. We have morbid obesity. We have comorbidities. I'm glad that it's finally coming out that with COVID, most people who died had what's known as comorbidities.
That's right.
What's a comorbidity? Well, it's you have other things when combined with what you have now will effing kill you.
100%.
And I just read something the other day, and I don't know the science, so please, I'm not quoting science here. But part of the cytokine storm that would happen with these COVID patients was if they were morbidly obese, somehow the fat would cause the cytokine storm to trigger even bigger than it would in someone who wasn't morbidly obese. That's why more of those people are dying. That's what you and I, Tony, are trying to stop.
Right.
And I think we're doing a valiant effort, but I'm just not sure we're moving fast enough before tens of millions of more people will die.
Yeah. And I really appreciate all of your comments. And for those who are listening, those cytokine storms that you hear about, cytokines, these small proteins that, they're important in cell signaling, and they actually help to in your immune function in a positive way. But too much of a good thing is bad. And so if you have a person who is morbidly obese or diabetic or hypertensive, and you see higher rates of inflammation, cytokine storms in people of color for whatever reason, it just is what it is. So that's why you also see disparities in people of color, because they tend to overreact and your immune system goes crazy. So it's important that we do what we can with lifestyle, so that if we are, whether you vaccinated or not, if you get exposed to COVID, you want to put yourself in the best position to fight it. So we don't want this overreaction, this cytokine storm. And what I do when I talk to patients, Vinnie, I coach them in the clinic. I connect the dots. And what you're trying to do is say, hey, guys, there's a connection here between your lifestyle and your chances of not doing well with something like COVID. So what I'll say to a person who is, let's say they're depressed, I'll say, up and down blood sugar is going to trigger your depression. So if we stabilize it with diet, then maybe you won't be as likely to crash. There's a threshold when you're okay, you're down, but you're not like, staring at the wall. And we're trying to prevent that. And that's what a lot of medicines attempt to do, but lifestyle does it much better. But you did trigger me using that same term when you mentioned protein. So I want to just share some thoughts about the protein question, because, based on the research I've read, Vinny, macronutrients, of course, it's protein, carbs, and fat. But protein, I would argue, in fact, that's why the Diet Doctor now has an entire section on their website talking about protein. Protein is probably the most important macronutrient, and it is essential to life. It's important that people understand that it's essential. And I say that because carbohydrates are not essential to life. Because protein can actually make glucose with, processes like gluconeogenesis, and can turn those amino acids, that term Vinny used earlier, into a source of glucose. So your body is perfectly fine with just protein. Now, many people eat these fake burger patties because they want to make sure they have adequate protein in their diet. And so rather, we're attempting to get our minimum protein requirement, whatever that number is. They say 50 minimum. It should be probably higher for most people. We also need to consider one other thing, Vinny, I want to bring to the conversation, which is the Digestible, Indispensable Amino Acid Scale, which is called DIAZ. And it really assesses the quality of the protein, right? So in other words, the quality of the protein has to be considered as much as how much protein. And the higher that score, the higher the percentage of protein that we're going to actually get into our body. Now, newsflash, when you eat plant sources of protein, they have a much lower DIAS score than the animal sources of protein. And then keep in mind what Vinny was saying earlier. Plants are not complete proteins. They don't have the 9 essential amino acids as opposed to an egg, which does. An egg is probably the healthiest thing on the planet in so many ways. So you have documentaries like Game Changers, which suggest that a plant source of protein is equal to an animal source of protein. But if you look at their DIAS score, you take a 3-ounce steak, for example. A 3-ounce steak has a score of 112, and 3 of those eggs I just mentioned has a score of 113. If you look at the diet score of something like lentils, the score is like 54. And for peanut protein, peanut butter, should I say, sandwich, that's about 43. So in other words, I would have to eat twice as much plant-based food to equal what the animal-based food is as it relates to protein. So, Vinny, as you hear those thoughts and comments, what's your thoughts on this whole idea of the quality of the protein?
Yeah, it's funny when you watch movies like you mentioned. Which one did you mention? You mentioned
the Game Changers.
Game Changers.
Yep.
I talk about Game Changers in my movie.
No surprise.
By the way, folks, your esteemed Dr. Tony Hampton is in my movie. So if you guys want to pick it up, you can. I don't know when this is coming out, but the movie will be out on January 11th. It's on pre-sale right now on Apple iTunes. I talk a bit about Game Changers in the movie, and the reason being is, whether it's What the Health or Game Changers or any of these vegan documentaries where they're not fudging the truth. They're just making up complete lies, right? And What the Health, they were saying, if you even look at an egg, one egg a week, it will literally cause pus in your body. And my question was, pus in your body? Where is this pus? Because I eat 6 to 8 eggs a day.
I'm planning to eat 5. Right, I'm eating 5 today, so we're both going to be pussing today.
Yeah, I'm going to have pus coming out of my ears. Wait, you're saying one a week will cause enough pus and it's going to clog my arteries and all this stuff. And I eat, at minimum 6 a day, and I get my cholesterol checked like everyone else, and it's perfect. The doctor always goes perfect in the normal range. You're normal. My triglycerides are always like 50 or 60 or some number like that. And the doctor's always asking me, how do you get it that low? And it's like, I just don't eat junk. I don't eat anything that causes that to go up. But in the movie Game Changers, they talk about pea protein. The movie Game Changers is all about, it was put out by James Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
James Cameron, before the movie, invested in a pea protein company.
Mm.
So, he had a vested interest. And I don't mean a small investment. He invested like 34 point something million dollars in this multinational pea protein company. And then he did a movie, and he even got his friend Arnold Schwarzenegger to show up in the film. And Arnold was talking about how he became a vegan. Now, I debunk all of this in my new movie, Beyond Impossible, because I show a video that Arnold Schwarzenegger puts out after the movie where he's showing what, the greatest bodybuilder of all time eats every day. He opens up his fridge. He goes, I eat a lot of eggs and a lot of meat. This is after the movie where he lied for his friend, James Cameron, and said, I've become a vegan because it's the way to go. And then after the movie, he says, no, psych, I was just kidding. Look what I really eat.
Wow.
Not only that, I looked at Game Changers several different ways. Or Tony, you got me on a tear now.
All right, now you're good.
Because I looked at Game Changers and I went, okay, they're saying that this guy in the movie is the strongest man in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I went, okay. I'm a nerd. I've been a nerd my entire life, and I've been into weightlifting. I don't know if you can tell, Tony, I have a squat rack behind me in this photo.
Yes,
that's what that red thing is.
Okay.
I was lifting weights 5 minutes. I just threw this shirt on. I still have my sweaty T-shirt on underneath. I just threw a dry shirt on to be to respect you and your podcast. I was working out 5 minutes before the show. I'm a nerd when it comes to working out. I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. I'm 59. Yep. That's well over 50 years. I mean, wait a minute. This guy, they're saying in a vegan movie, Game Changers, that this is the strongest man in the world?
Right.
I've never seen him in the competition because I'm a nerd who watches the competition. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, maybe he just didn't make it to television. Well, if he didn't even make it to the finals on television, he's not one of the strongest men in the world, but it's still pretty respectable to get on, in that group.
That's right.
So I did a little more research and a little more. It turns out that basically he was the strongest man at a strongman vegan competition where there was like 800 people who showed up in this town somewhere in South Texas. He was the strongest vegan man in the world that day at that competition. So I didn't even leave that alone. I went, okay, how strong is he? I started looking at some of his numbers. High school weightlifting students are stronger than this dude. So they're calling him in the movie, strongest man in the world. He has world records. And in my movie, I debunked that. They also had, if you saw the movie, a woman, they said this woman is the top 400-meter runner in the world, and she's a vegan. Okay, right there, I would sit there and go, wait a minute, maybe there is something behind not getting the proper amount of protein. Maybe there is something, and then I even started thinking to myself, wait a minute, 400 meters, you are using a lot of sugar. She's young enough. So being young and living on sugar at that age and being very talented, that helps to make it to the Olympics. Maybe that's how she became a gold medal winner. Simple Google search.
That's right.
She never won a gold medal. She never won a silver medal. She wasn't even on the podium. So now I have to figure out where she placed. She didn't place 5th. She didn't place 10th. She didn't place 15th. She finished 24th. They're calling her a superstar, and she didn't even make it onto the television screen where we see all the heats and everything.
That's right.
She didn't even get to that. She had 23 meat eaters in front of her who was winning medals. So just looking at two of them I could have debunked more.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gone down the Cam Newton, rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
The guy went vegan 1 year. He had one injury, couldn't recover from it because what do you need to recover from injury?
That's right.
You need red meat. You need amino acids
Mm-hmm.
to recover.
That's right.
Guy went vegan, out of the league in 1 year, pretty much. So you look around and you go, well, there was no truth in that movie. And let me just add to this. When I called you and said, I didn't call you, I sent you an email. I said, Tony, would you like to be in my movie? You didn't say, what's it about? You didn't say, when is it? You didn't say, well, hang on, Vin. I'm assuming you went, well, Vinny has a track record. He's got 2 movies. He's had some esteemed people in his movies. You wrote back and said yes. When I called Nina Teicholz, she's been in my first 2 movies. Absolutely. When do you want to record? When I called all of them, everybody that's in my movie, Frederick Lacroix, when I called Mitt Lerner, right? They didn't even hesitate. They, just like you, they wrote back, yes, let me know when, where, what. I called the heads of the vegan community. I called Walter Willett. Nope, no can do. I called Gregor. I don't think I called Clapper. He was on my list, but I just got sick of, I called McDougall. I called Ornish. I called all of the top vegans. And every one of them gave me pretty close to the same excuse. I'm busy that day. Did I give you a day when I didn't say a day for you? Did I tell you? I just said, would you like to be in my movie? You wrote back.
Right.
Whenever you need me, brother.
Just
we're
let
good.
me know. That's right.
Yeah. These people went, I'm busy that day. And I went back and read the letter. It's like, did I put a date in there?
That's right.
There's no date. As a matter of fact, in my movie, on the screen, I put the letter that I sent to all the vegans and you guys. When you see the movie, Tony, you're going to recognize the letter because you got the same letter they got.
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to show you their responses back to me. You're going to be shocked at these responses.
Yeah.
I was trying to have a straightforward dialogue.
That's what Can We Talk is the name of this podcast. And I've had Dr. Terry Mason, who I do a couch conversation with the doctors, with the Congressman Danny Davis Monday nights. And I had him on the podcast. So I have vegans on my podcast. I just want to talk and allow them to express what they feel is best for humans. Now, I only have one mission, which is to help people achieve metabolic health, Vinny. Now, if I have a patient who's a vegan vegetarian and they're achieving metabolic health, have at it. I am not going to tell them. Of course, I'm going to tell them you're going to be deficient in B12 and you may need a little iron, you may need a little zinc, et cetera. But you do what works for you. What shocks me about your comments, Vinny, is that you have highly educated people who have a strong belief system in what they believe, just like I did when I was a vegetarian / vegan for 8 years. But this is the thing. I am a scientist first. And once I saw science based on randomized controlled trials versus the old studies are fine if that's all you have. So if you want to do an observational study with food frequency questionnaires, or you look at data and you're looking at it backwards retrospectively or forward prospectively, that's fine. You can do those things if that's all you have. But once you get randomized controlled trials, you should be able to stand before the camera, stand before Vinny, express your point. And all you really need to do is compare to the standard American diet. We won right there, right? But for some reason, there's this inability to have the confidence to express their point. And it may come back to what I said earlier, which is those studies that have been done that don't say that those diets are horrible for you. It just says that the animal diets are actually maybe better for you. So, and I know it's better because when you mentioned your lipids, Vinny, I was, I'm 53. And when I was able to look at my not just my lipids, but my coronary artery calcium score test. I'm eating all those eggs that we talked about, and it was a 0. I was a little nervous because I wouldn't want to be out here preaching, eating this way. And, my numbers don't look good, but it's a 0. So, and when I look at my cholesterol numbers, just like you, they look good. So I just think that if we're going to have a dialogue and talk about these questions, we need people on the other side who are able to have dialogue, because I respect everybody who's trying to help people. We just got to be able to talk about the nuances. So when people are trying to decide what they want to do, they have the correct information, not based on some bias, but it's based on science. So one thing I want to kind of say real quick about going back to protein and the quality, a lot of people don't understand this idea of processed food, right? And when I try to explain processed food to people, which I put the Impossible Burger in that category for sure, even though it's plant-based, I tell patients that if you're vegetarian and you eat real food and it's not processed, you'll probably be healthier. If you're animal-based and you don't eat processed food, you'll probably be healthier. And some patients say, well, what do you mean by processed food? And I'll say, well, let's use wheat as an example. Wheat is something that is growing out there. In order to get it digestible in any way in your body, you have to process it. So, but what do we do with wheat? We make the pizza crust, we make the bread, we make the pastas, we make the stuffing. And I'm going to say dressing because in the world I live in, Vinny, we call it dressing, not stuffing. So talk a little bit about your thoughts about processed food and why the Impossible Burger kind of fits that category.
Yeah, when I first started looking at it, the first thing I did when I saw the stock rising, I look at the stock market all the time. I've always been interested in economy, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know much about economy, but I'm always interested and I'm always learning, and it's been a lifelong thing. When you grow up poor and you don't want to die poor, you look at economy. And I started noticing that across all board, this processed meat stuff was just rising and rising and rising. And then I noticed that companies like Tyson, which is a big meat conglomerate, and Cargill, they were dropping $500 million, $1 billion into these processed meats. And
diversifying.
Like, wow, these guys are diversifying. They see that this is coming down the pike, and they don't want to be caught in third gear going around the turn. They need to drop it into second gear and get a little meat on it, a little wood on the ball, right?
That's right. Good business. Good business. 2 or 3
different sports, but so they're just going to do what they're going to do. They're businesses, so it's like there must be something behind this. So I looked into it, and the first thing I did was looked at just the pure ingredients, and I went, okay, pretty benign, but everything that they were doing was processed. It was like highly processed because, as you said, in order to get wheat to, like it, as I said on Dr. Drew's show last week, you cannot walk into a wheat field, take a bud, put it in your mouth, and eat it. If you do, you will get a severe stomach ache. Your body will try to reject it. You will throw it up. You will get diarrhea, or you will end up, your gut will be twisted. You'll be in the hospital. That's the fact if you go in the field and eat wheat. Right? If you pluck an apple off a tree, you can eat it all day long.
That's right. And that's proof that it's not an essential nutrient, because before we had meals and things, you couldn't even eat this stuff. So how could it be essential to life if you couldn't even eat it before the technology was developed?
Even if you go to New Mexico and see what, these areas where the American Indians used to live, you'll see these in the rocks, you'll see these holes in the rock. They would grow corn, and they would have to put it inside these little divvies that they made in the rocks, and they would have to grind it up and grind corn. Corn's a grain. You cannot eat corn the way it is. It will just kill you. So they would grind it up and then boil the crap out of it, and then, pound it out and then boil it and the whole thing. You have to do you have to process this. There is a process, and now you're putting something that the Indians didn't realize it, but they were like, hey, this gives us energy, we'll do it, right? I'm looking at all the stuff going into the Beyond Burger, and I'm going, wow, this is a lot of highly processed stuff. And I said, okay, well, this is not healthy for the human. This is going to cause inflammation. If you eat this, it will cause more inflammation than if you were at Dodger Stadium trying to gut down one of those Dodger dogs with all the crap on it. Or if you drink a Coca-Cola. You know, I look at other things and go, I can make an argument that a Coca-Cola is healthier. I even made an argument that I think an Oreo, which is also vegan, was healthier than the Beyond patties. And then I went, okay, but they're saying it's good for the environment, because the argument the vegans are making right now is that cow burps are causing all of this gas, all of the CO2. Well, yeah, we do have a CO2 carbon problem with the planet. But when I looked into it, it's in fact coming from factories and cars and everything else. Cow burps, it's a methane that lasts in the atmosphere for 10 years and then it's washed. The stuff that comes out of your car or your leaf blower or factories and all that, it lasts not for hundreds but thousands of years.
Eternity,
so methane is generated and regenerated, and you're right back to zero. So cows are not the problem. But when I look deeper into the fake meat, all of the, not all of, but most of the components are made in China. So first you have to make the components in a factory. You're bellowing crap into the atmosphere. And then you have to put it on some kind of conveyance to get here. A plane, you can't put it on the train, a plane or a boat. So now you got fossil fuels trying to get it to the United States. And then we put it all together here, again, in a factory, bellowing more stuff into the atmosphere that's not going to go away, folks, for thousands of years. And then we hand it to you and say, hey, it's good for you, it's good for the planet. Neither one was true. And when I looked at that, I went, okay, is there enough here for a documentary? Do I have enough to cover 90 minutes? And the answer was no. I had enough to cover 4 hours. I had to cut it down to 90 minutes. Because I can't keep someone's interest for longer than 90 minutes.
That's right.
And then you start talking about, well, the ethical reasons for becoming a vegan. I don't want to see anything with a face or eyes that can look at me. I don't want to eat that. I don't want to see it die. Okay, let's go back to our wheat field, our corn field, our soybean field. Let's go back to that. I literally, in my documentary, I have a guy, John, who is a big-time soybean farmer. He sent me raw footage from a combine that he was driving, and he even talked about it in the film. He goes, look, we put these combines, we just sit in the combines, but it's run by GPS. And he goes, when I see rabbits and skunks and all that, and mice and all of that in the field, I will slow down the combine to let them get out of the way. He goes, but they don't, most of them don't get out of the way anyway. He goes, a conscientious driver like myself will allow the animals to run. He goes, you're paying a guy who wants to get home to his family. He's got that combine on full speed. It's, he's checking his phone. They don't even have to look. He's playing with his phone in the combine and the whole thing. The GPS is running over every kind of little furry animal you want to imagine. But it gets worse than that, because John sent me some of the most disturbing footage that I've ever seen. There's also deer and things like wild hogs. He's in Arkansas, so they have the razorback hogs and the whole thing. They pay snipers to go out at night and kill thousands of pounds of meat per night. Thousands of pounds per night that just die in cold blood. And I have the footage of it with the infrared lighting and the whole thing. They're just out there with AK-47s and long rifles that you will go hunt deer with and everything else. And they're just killing everything. They have to, or their crops would be eaten.
That breaks my heart.
It's just sad what goes on. And as John says, he goes, look, we have all this meat, But when you're gonna go knock on someone's door at 2 in the morning and go, "Hey, I have 1,000 pounds of hog here. Do you want it?"
Right.
You gotta gut that immediately
Hmm.
and quarter
That's
it and
right.
clean it, or it's
It's
all
just going
bad
to
by
be
the
a
morning.
problem. That's right.
Right.
Wow, you're blowing my mind. I really think that'll be striking. You hate to be dramatic, but you have to call it out. It is what it is, and you really are making me want to even go back to what you spoke about earlier about, well, what's in this stuff, and I want to comment on that because before we gathered to talk, I got the label. In fact, I printed the label, and I have it kind of here, a little bit of a
Yeah.
label. But so when I looked at it, it's a few things that caught my attention. The first is before I get to the ingredient part, the question is, let's see what the calories are. Some people, we don't tend to focus on calories. We just tell people to eat real food until you're full and avoid the grains and the sugar and things like that. So calorie wise, the Impossible Burger was around 710, and the beef burger equivalent was about 650. So a little bit more in terms of calories, which was interesting. If you get a beef patty, it doesn't really have a lot of salt. It may have about 40 to 50 grams of sodium. And you season it based on, your taste, but we don't have to overdo that. And the irony is that we can tolerate more salt because when you're on low carb, you tend to need to add salt back. But the Impossible Burger, for those patients who are concerned about salt, and we have patients with hypertension, congestive heart failure, and although salt's our friend, they're more conscious of it. So they have about 1,250 grams of sodium
Wow.
in the Impossible. It's insane, right? And then let's talk about protein. So and we talked a little bit about the quality of the protein is what matters, right? So even though the Impossible Burger has 47 versus a beef patty, which is 39, the chances are they're not going to be able to get the full benefit of that protein for two reasons. One, because the diet score is going to be lower, and second, because it's processed. So, and when you process food, you reduce the diet score as well. So you probably, I don't know what the score is, but it's not good. So, but the thing, when you then go into the label, right? And I looked at this label, right? And I was like, okay, there's something in here that talks about leg hemoglobin. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what they were talking about, leg hemoglobin. But it's an ingredient that the Impossible Burger folk put in there so that when I bite into that burger, it gives me that kind of bleeding effect, that juice that falls down your face, which we love
Mm-hmm.
when we're eating beef. And it's from the root nodules of the soybean plant, and it's made after they do a fermentation process. But it's not just important for the Impossible Burger to get that nice beef taste, but it's also helpful for mass production. This is a business, and in order to mass produce the amount of Impossible Burgers you need to have an efficient process. So they use that for that as well. But the problem is that when they came up with this leg hemoglobin, it was they have to test things to make sure it's safe. So they did a 28-day rat study. So there's two problems. One is it's only 28 days, and number two, rat study. So a rat study is okay as we initially think about ways to help, make sure things are safe. But you do want to do some clinical trials if possible in humans to know if it really affects us. So anyway, when the study was done, there were some adverse effects of leg hemoglobin that were found. There were changes in the blood chemistries, something called the reticulocyte count was low. Those are those immature red blood cells that we need, and that could be a problem that could lead to anemia and things that affect our bone marrow. There was some clotting issues that decrease ability to clot. Obviously, if I cut myself, I want to be able to clot. There's
Right.
something called alkaline phosphatase, which when low, it can be a sign of malnutrition, things like that, celiac disease. There was some issues with increased albumin, which could be an issue that kidneys are not functioning properly. So you have all of these adverse effects. And the key is this, Impossible Foods, which makes Impossible Burgers, they felt like these adverse effects were not toxic. They felt that they were transient, and we shouldn't worry about it. So it's again a lot of problems with that. But again, going back to what we said earlier, if we say if you're a person, let's just say I'm in Chicago. Where are you at, Vinny?
I'm in Virginia now.
Okay, cool. You were in California and you came to your
Yeah,
senses and moved
I
to
kicked the
Virginia.
California habit after 30 years, and
That's right. Too many celebrities for you, Vinny. So you
it
can't.
was
But
horrible, man. It just got too bad. Yeah.
I don't even want to know. So imagine you get in your car and I'm in my car and we take our trip and we're gonna go and travel to New Orleans and places like that and what we're trying to do is to say to people, listen, let's think about this and think about how logical it is to eat these processed foods while we're on our trip to New Orleans, right? So if I
Right.
now this is the key. I should say that differently. If I'm on my way to New Orleans and I stop by Burger King and I get a burger, that's probably okay because what the hell else am I going to do? If I'm not prepared and I'm vegan and I want to, so that may be okay. But if I decide this is something I should eat on a regular basis and I don't know what the heck a leg hemoglobin is, that's not a logical decision. We don't want to eat processed foods when we don't have to. And if we do have to do it, it should be sparingly. So again, your thoughts on these ingredients. I mean, what other things that you guys discover as you kind of prepare for the documentary?
Yeah, they call it heme. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
You know,
It looks
they've
like
shortened
blood. I
it.
saw it. It looks like blood, basically.
It looks like blood. Even if you look at the trailer I put out, the official trailer that Gravitas put out on my movie, you see a big vat of this stuff, and when you're looking at it, going, really, I'm putting some of that in my body, and you know, let's talk a little bit about you mentioned traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I drive a lot by car because I love driving. I love seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I would fly somewhere, I'm looking out of the plane, going, I wonder what's going on down there right now. So for that reason, if I have time, I drive everywhere. And I just did last month. I drove over 2,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to Louisiana, and then I got on the Natchez Trace with my parents, and we rode the whole Natchez Trace, and then I drove back to Virginia. So it was about 1,900 miles, and not once did I have to go away from my high meat egg diet.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about a vegan or a vegetarian having to stop at a fast food restaurant, we're never surprised by a driving trip. It's not like you're standing there. When we sneeze, we get surprised by the sneeze, right? We
Mm-hmm.
weren't prepared. All of a sudden, there's an itchy thing in your nose, and there's a reaction, and you sneeze. When you're going on a long trip, you pretty much know at least a couple of days ahead of time, I'm going on a long trip.
Mm-hmm.
You could go to the store, you could buy all the vegetation you want, you could chop it up, you could put it in Ziploc bags. I have 2 or 3 of these little tiny Playmate style ice chests that I've had now for I think the oldest one when I was living in New Orleans, so it's about 35 years old. It still works like a charm, right? And when you go on a trip, whether you're a meat eater or a vegan, you can put stuff in those ice chests, and they make these little tiny things that you put in your freezer, and they stay cold. You don't even have to have ice anymore. When you stop for the evening, just toss it back into a freezer. It gets cold again, and you keep your food cold. Every hotel room I stay in now has a little fridge in it. So I boil eggs before I go. I make hamburger patties and put cheese on them, and I have all of this stuff with me before I leave, right? There's no reason to stop anywhere. The only place I'll stop is at a crappy Starbucks to get their crappy coffee. And then I even have my own heavy cream that I know doesn't have carrageenan or anything else in it. A good, healthy, heavy cream. I just pour it in from my ice chest. And so there's ways to do this. And I've always said we become like horses on a trail. If you have a horse, if you've ever ridden a horse, and even if you're not a horseback rider, you'll notice that if you're trail riding a horse, the horse will bend down, will lean down, and there could be dandelion, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
horse will eat a dandelion, which is so bitter. It's but when a horse is on a trail, it doesn't care. It will eat a dandelion. If you
Mm-hmm.
took dandelion and threw it in that horse's stall, it will take a leak on it. It won't even sniff it. It's like, well, what are you doing? I'm at home now. Give me the good stuff. Give me the hay.
Right.
Give me some alfalfa. I'm not going to eat that dandelion crap. But we're just like horses. We eat well at home, whether you're a vegan or a meat eater. And then you get on the trail and you go, okay, find me a dandelion. Find me a
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's, which is
Mm-hmm.
the equivalent of a dandelion, right? So there are ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when people go, well, I was on a trip and I got caught out. Okay, once in a blue moon, there was a death in the family. You got on the road right away. I get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're correct that people shouldn't be eating the stuff, number one, at all.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do get stuck out and you're a vegan, there are other things you can do before you end up with an Impossible Burger from
That's right.
McDonald's or Burger King or wherever they're selling the stuff.
That's right. What I love
that's
about
the
your
way
comment.
I would handle it.
Listen, Vinny, I just submitted a article. I have a low carb corner with the diet doctor. They gave me a web page where I can write articles, and they, we decided it'd be nice to do something for the holidays, and so I wrote an article that gives people tips on, if they decide to eat low carb for the holidays, why that would make sense and not. If they decide to not, New Orleans, right? I mean, how well did we eat down there, right? So, so if they decide, right? I mean, I love that. And the food. So if you decide to, break the rules and eat dressing, which again, or stuffing, depending on how you like to frame it, I'll probably tweet that, Vinny, because that stuffing dressing, because I didn't know that 76% of Americans say stuffing. And in my world, it's dressing.
We called it dressing. I grew up in the deep South, and we just called it dressing.
Exactly, and that's
when
where
I first started hearing stuffing. It was when I moved to California, and I was like, "What's the difference?"
What is that?
Because we called it rice dressing.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, we called it dressing or rice dressing. There was corn dressing or rice dressing. They made two kinds in the South.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm definitely familiar with dressing, and I, just like the person who hears me say dressing, look at me like, a deer in the headlights. I'm doing the opposite when I hear stuffing. So the thing I wanted to mention, though, you said preparedness, right? So in the article, I said how important it was to be prepared. So if you're going to someone's home who may not have a diet that's yours, there's a way to prepare for that. Rather you eat before you go, or rather you bring a low carb option that you can then share and consume. So I think what I found for a lot of my patients, being prepared, having a plan is half the battle. You just don't want to get caught up. Even to the extent when we go to restaurants, we always review the menu before we go. You're just being prepared so you can say, what is it? Do they have enough stuff there to allow us to do what we need to do? So, but when you're driving, Vinny, on that road, and you're on your path, on my mind, you see a lot of farms, and you see a lot of different types of agriculture. And I wanted to just kind of, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, talk a little bit about regenerative farming. I know that when you asked me questions related to being on the documentary, I know we talked a little bit about that. And I wanted to just share a couple of my thoughts, and then we can hear your thoughts. And the reason why we understand that factory farming is not perfect, but regenerative farming is a nice alternative. And what I like about regenerative farming is that it doesn't really disturb the soil as much. And when you think about conventional farming, there's a lot of tillage and turning the soil over, and that can create problems. They do it, for weed control, things like that. But it's really it can lead to soil erosion. It could lead to nutrient runoff into the water. And it can also release greenhouse gases as well. So we do like regenerative farming a little bit more. we also know that in conventional farming, you have to use a lot of chemicals. They use a lot of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides as opposed to cow poop, which is probably a better fertilizer than some synthetic. And I also love, if we were to think about this in a total way, that the farmers don't have to be exposed to all these chemicals when they're trying to make food for us to eat. And I also like the fact that with regenerative farming, there's a little bit more animal and plant diversity. So, and as you know, with conventional farming, you'll see one crop, corn or soy, and that's pretty much it. So there's no diversity. And I just think that's not the ideal way to go. So, and there's other factors. There's too many to mention. But Vinny, I know that was discussed in the documentary. What's your thoughts on regenerative farming as an alternative to traditional factory farming?
Yeah, I grew up in a place in Louisiana known as Cancer Alley, where there's a lot of, Louisiana just sold out to every industry. It was like a third world country. You could just go down there and they would,
That's right.
payoffs and rip-offs. And
they also sold out to the poor people because they're the ones that live around all of this nonsense.
Exactly. And the town I grew up in was, we had middle class and poor. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived right next to CF Industries, which is the largest urea plant in the world. And most of the kids I grew up with, including me, has had some sort of cancer at this point in our life. I had leukemia. So do the math on that.
Oh my God.
It does, it doesn't fall on any deaf ears that MD Anderson, the best cancer research place in the United States, happens to be right there in Houston, about 4 hours west of where I grew up. And most of my friends end up at MD Anderson. And, so CF Industry is making urea. Urea is what cows put out naturally, urine, urea, and it fertilizes the land naturally. As you mentioned, cow poop does. For your audience, I own a vitamin company, purevitaminclub.com. The number one product that we sell at purevitaminclub.com is magnesium. Out of everything else we sell, magnesium. Why? Because doctors all over the nation is telling people you're low in magnesium. You need to get magnesium. Well, where did this come from? It comes from we're not getting magnesium from the food anymore. We used to get it from vegetation. But when you're doing all of this monocropping, after you rape the land once or twice and you keep growing on that land and you're adding fake stuff in like the urea, which is made in my hometown, you're not getting all the nutrients from the soil that you need. Regenerative farming can bring us back to that, to where we can make my company's product obsolete. I don't see it happening in my lifetime. I don't see it happening in our lifetime.
Right.
So, the fact of the matter is that's when you go, Jesus Christ, well, that's just one thing. Well, it's not just magnesium. It's a lot of stuff. Whenever you monocrop, you're raping the land over and over and over again. The only way you can even get something to grow from it, luckily we still have the sun, that helps. But you need to add all sorts of, chemicals to the ground. You're killing it. We're killing the earth. That's what's causing, folks, the problems, the stuff we're seeing in the ozone layer. That's why the polar ice caps are melting. This is all a result of that. They want to call people like me climate deniers because we don't go along with it. No, I'm not denying we have a big problem. I'm with you guys. You're right. We have a problem. The planet is melting. The polar ice caps are melting. But it's not for the cow farts and the cow belches. That's what can actually turn the problem around. We didn't have a problem when we had bison all over this nation. We had buffalo roaming everywhere. That's a ruminant. That's just like a cow. Okay, no problem. Where was all the gases? Well, we didn't have cars, right? We had Indians on horseback. Where were they riding? They were riding a ruminant.
Right.
No problems back then. We had all of this going on, no problems. Now we got people with leaf blowers and cars and trains and planes and boats and factories and everything else. That's the problem. Yet the solution, their solution to the problem, let's do more stuff in the factory. Let's do more of that. We're going to fix the problem by getting rid of cows. We actually have the guy, Brown from Beyond Meat, saying in the film, he wants all cattle to be off the planet by 2035.
I actually heard that comment when I researched for our interview, and I was like, that, I even literally said, I love cows, but he felt like the impact would be so much more helpful to eliminate cows that so even though I love them, I think we should kill them. It's such a hypocritical statement.
The stuff he says in this movie is just, it's beyond anything you can possibly ever imagine. As a matter of fact, when he says it, I come in my movie and I go, okay, maybe he was misquoted.
Right.
So then I find him saying it again in another interview.
Right.
He said, folks, this is what they're doing. The people who want animals to live want to get rid of cattle. They want them off the planet. They want this. Go tell that to the Indian folks who think the cows are God, some kind of God. I'm not making this up. I was in India.
Let me just do this real quick. I just pulled up the quote. He said, just like you said, Impossible Burger was created to address the impact that animals have on our planet. Just like I said, I love cows, but I would eliminate them because the net benefit is good for the planet. So basically, he believes that cow poop is the biggest scientific problem in the world. This is what he said. It's mind-boggling.
Now, here, let me give you some good news, Tony. Even before this movie is coming out, because remember, I look at economy, that company is not going up anymore. The stock has been dropping. Good, I'm hoping that my movie becomes the death knell, that just people will finally because look, hundreds of thousands of people saw my first movie. Hundreds of thousands saw a second. I'm hoping that I still have an audience that will watch this third movie and go, oh, wait, this guy's making a good point here. Maybe cows are good. Folks, when you see what's in this movie, the truth is stranger than fiction. You're not going to believe what you're watching. When we were putting it, I didn't realize, because when you're making a movie, you're so close to it. Did I send you a copy of it, Tony?
I didn't get it yet.
Oh, that my people should have sent you a copy.
Oh, yeah.
When my buddy, Dr. Drew Weiss, he didn't even wait to interview me. He called me and went, my God, I cannot believe what you did here. He goes, it seems, and by the way, I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth.
That's right.
Whenever it seems too strange to be true, when the attorneys have to look at everything in the movie, like they go frame by frame. And there was one where Michael Greger was being interviewed by London Real on the London Real interview show. And he says, listen, we can't use that clip. And I said, why? And he said, because you're making the man, you took like a 25-second, 30-second clip. You made the man look like he's insane. And his people can say that you took something out of context to make him look crazy. I said, you're right. Go watch the entire London Real video and then give me a call back. Now, I have to pay this attorney to go sit and watch a 45-minute video. They don't watch for free, Tony.
No, understood.
He called me back and he said, never mind. Because I had no idea. My attorney doesn't know who Michael Greger is. He goes, never mind. The guy, and he goes, I had my assistant pull up other stuff with Michael Greger. I'm shocked.
Yeah,
I'm shocked.
That's right.
He couldn't believe it. He just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I just think their mission is different than ours, which is, and again, I can't speak for other people, but for me, my mission is to help people heal. And when I see things that are different than how I approach it, I don't demonize those things. All I really want is to live in a world where people can look at the science and say, oh, by the way, I don't have to fear fat. Like we talked about earlier. Oh, by the way, I don't have to fear cholesterol. Oh, by the way, meat's not killing us. And then for those who choose that path, choose it. And for those who choose a different path, choose it. But what we shouldn't, this is not a fight. This is just putting facts in front of people who are intelligent enough to consume those facts, maybe do a little additional, even after watching your documentary. They can then do. In fact, let me say this. One thing I did do also, as I thought about this conversation, what are additional resources? One is a documentary called "Kiss the Ground." Another one called "Sacred Cow." There's a book by Gabby Brown, another Brown, ironically, entitled "Dirt to Soil." There's a book called "Vegetarian Myth." The Rondell Institute and the Savory Institute provide additional information about regenerative farming and things like that. And if you're a kind of person who wants to support that, you got eatwild.com and localharvest.org. So I just wanted to put that out there, because when they consume your documentary, and again, I thank you so much for allowing me to have a voice in it as well, they're going to probably be hungry for more information. So, and then even as you continue to source information, if you're looking at trials, make sure it says randomized controlled trial. Again, because we have enough data to support this way of thinking. So as we wrap up, Vinnie, any final thoughts that would be, and of course, how can people not only consume the documentary, but your book and other things that you have out there?
Yeah, my book is called, the book has started it all for me, Fitness Confidential, where I kind of put forth this idea that we've been doing it all wrong. It came out, it was this juggernaut of a bestseller. I'm bragging about something I did, but I couldn't have ever imagined selling the number of copies. It still sells today. That book is from 2013, and it's almost 10 years old now. And the book, every year I look at the numbers and I'm like, people are still buying this book in big numbers. In the podcast, we just went past 2,000 episodes on the Fitness Confidential podcast. It can be gotten wherever podcasts are gotten. Tony has been on at least 3 episodes. And one of the things I love about Tony is that he's one of the early pioneers of going into the Black community and doing this. And I applaud him for that, because I grew up in a Black community. So most of my friends happen to be Black. Can we still say Black, Tony, or did we move to some other phrase?
No, we're good with that right now. It depends on who you talk to, but Black is like
African American.
Okay.
Sometimes
right.
It's Black.
Black is still okay, though. Black is still okay.
All right, Black's still on the table. That's good.
Yeah.
So when I learned of Tony, 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, I went, I got to get this dude on, because
that's right.
There needs to be. The only problem with Tony is that we need to clone Tony 1,000 times over in the Black communities, because I think as far as health and and fitness goes, they're the most underserved communities, especially the urban communities. We always think of Black people as always being urban. No, a lot of them are not. They're getting the message. We're not worried about those people, because they're getting the message. It's the urban communities where we're just falling off of a cliff. Tony, I can't thank you enough for what you do. And I just want you to know, you always have a platform with me and on my podcast and my movies and everything else I do. We just got to figure out how to get more Tonys out there.
Yeah.
Because I'm glad that Diet Doctor now gave you a corner on their thing, because I didn't know that. That's huge.
Yeah, it is.
That is huge.
The whole low carb community has embraced me, but you were one of the first. And so, but I agree with you, because what we talked about earlier about cytokines and, all that inflammation, people of color are impacted even greater. And we want to save everybody, but we certainly don't want to forget the communities that are suffering more. And I do want to thank the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners also allowing me to chair their outreach community. So part of that goal is to reach people who may not hear this message. So I think all of these platforms will, in fact, if you think of it, and shout out to Charles Maddox for creating your YUR TV network, because again, we have to reach. And I appreciate the documentaries he's made, and we're just going to keep reaching. And again, our goal is not to do anything other than make sure people hear the message that they can heal with lifestyle. And so again, as we wrap up, Vinnie, my heart is warm. I appreciate you. I really appreciate that hat, because I've been thinking about New Orleans the whole time, and that's like my home away from home, because I went to Xavier 4 years there. I met my wife there, and it's really a place that I'll always cherish, because it's such a unique culture. So I appreciate you. We'll be doing more stuff together moving forward, and I look forward to the success of the documentary, and we're gonna end with that. So thanks for having a conversation on Can We Talk, and I really hope you have a wonderful Sunday, because we're recording on a Sunday, as I kind of get prepared to spend some time with my family as well. So Vinnie, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Tony.
All right, no problem. Take care.